we'll do the live thing first. Like. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a Sober October recap. I didn't let anyone know this year that I was doing a pod, or I didn't. Let's just put it this way: I didn't make it a big deal.
Why?
This was because Bad Boys Move in Silence. Jack Williams. We got Jack Williams in the house here. We got our producer Christian Obino.
What's going on, boys?
behind the camera here,
Shout out Big
as they always are.
Hey.
Love you, boys.
Yes.
And, like I said, I didn't really make it a big deal, but I did Sober October. No drinking, no smoking weed, no drugs of any kind. Actually, that's a lie. I did smoke a couple cigars, but I didn't inhale. Bill Clinton style. But, I wasn't drinking wasn't like the biggest thing for me. I wasn't like big time drinker, but, I've talked about before, I like smoking weed and stuff, and that was definitely something to get over. Every year when I was still playing football, every year I stopped because we would get tested, right? So back in from 2010 to 2013 at least, I think they just changed. If I'm wrong, maybe this year they just changed the ruling that Canadian athletes can smoke weed now, and it's not illegal. So let's just put it this way. So if you got booked smoking weed, if you got tested and you got caught smoking weed, you would get suspended for 2 years. So it wasn't like you got kicked out of sport, but 2 years is a long time, especially university sports. Yeah. And this is every sport. No, you cannot participate at all in any Canadian sports. It's the Canadian Ethics for or the CES, the Canadian CCES, the Canadian Center for Ethics in Sport, and they test from basically these guys are fucking around back here. Anyway, these guys the CCES they test almost every level of sport, and they're the ones that are supposed to, make sure no one's doing any type of drugs. That's any performance-enhancing drug, and then also some illicit drugs. I remember they would test us a bunch of times, and it was pretty wild. When they would test us, honestly, you'd have someone come in, and you'd actually have a tester watch you pee. They had to watch you actually pee.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically it's an extreme invasion in privacy, but that's one of the weird things that it's not super common knowledge. But I remember one of my sports ethics class, we were talking about this, and my professor was like, yeah, it's an extreme breach of privacy just for you to play sport. That's actually a pretty big thing. Not too many people they don't want to take steroids, they don't want to do a lot of things, but pretty much almost the whole team at least was tested once. I had a couple buddies tested multiple times. My one buddy was kind of pee shy, so he would be at the facility for 6 hours, because once they get you, that you can't leave. Right, and he just couldn't pee, and they can't just keep feeding you water, because eventually your urine will become too diluted. But yeah, that's what they do every year. So and I played football, which is a sport where testing is really popular. There was guys at Western, some of the guys on the basketball team and volleyball team, they'd be at least smoking weed all the time, because they just knew that they were never going to get tested for shit. Yeah. And it was basically a given that we were going to get tested. Let's just put it this way. And so didn't smoke weed during those years, and it was just it was 3-4 months, I'd say, where you'd have to take it off. And it was actually like a nice little break, right? Because you had to do it. There was no other no other reason behind it. It was that if you got tested, you're not going to play football. So when we, as a whole team, we'd kind of stop, and Christian and Jack are just doing bong togs back here. But every year the whole team would stop, and it was a bit of a bonding, because honestly, I'd say 80% of the football team probably smoked weed. So like by the end of the season, everyone is ready to smoke weed, because you're sore. Like smoking weed is probably like the best thing for football players, because it's a great recovery. Like maybe it is a little bit of a performance enhancer, because it's great recovery. You get to chill out. You're super sore, especially like come November and shit. It's freezing cold. Your body is just garbage, but you just can't smoke any weed. So you go home and you just kind of sit there.
How was weed for you when you did get that chance to smoke again?
So when you finally came back, honestly,
To the moon.
it's nuts. So like back in the days, because you take so much time off, you'd go pretty wild, because the thing is like the behavior is still there. So you still feel like you still pack the same amount of weed, like you still do the same bong toke, like as if you were still smoking normally. And then muscle memory and just the behavior is more ingrained, and your tolerance is back to zero. And like this month for sure, I found that, like honestly, I'll get to that in a sec. But anyway, we'd all be pretty stoked at the end of the season to finally, because out of season you'd be able to smoke. It's so funny. So my buddies would because out of season, if they found THC in your blood, no one was going to say anything. So one time, because the testers can come to your house, they can literally come to your house at any point. They came to my buddy's house, and they were like, yo, like let's just like
House?
Yeah. So for that CCS thing, that the Canadian Center for Ethics in Sport, you have to submit your address, where you live, what teams, all the teams, everything. They know, because they do these unannounced visits.
Pulled up at the crib with like no notice. That's crazy.
Zero notice, because they want to catch you to see if you're like in between cycles. So like what other athletes that get tested and they know their testing date, they cycle off any drug that they're going to take. But any governing body, like ethics body, when they're trying to find cheating, they make sure they try and catch you on these random visits. But the thing is that I was just listening to a podcast with I can't remember his name, but he's like the godfather of steroids in sports. He was talking Frank something Conti, whatever. So it's no longer sober October, people. So he
Tolerance is a little low.
so he was talking about like like you're allowed to have like misses. So like if someone shows up, and honestly, I'll tell you right now, so if someone shows up to your place and you just aren't there, that counts as like a miss, but they'll give you a couple of those misses. Like if it happens like 3 times, maybe it's an issue and they're going to be like, what's going on? But if you space those times out and they don't catch you, you're good.
So you need like an alibi.
Essentially a little bit, but they're pretty lax about like if you're just not home, like they kind of understand they're not going to wait around all day for you, because they have thousands of athletes, tens of thousands in the States, but like tons of athletes that they have to go, so they're not going to stick around. So one of the guys actually at Western, before I was there, he would be coming down to the stadium, and this was a classic thing that they would do. They'd come to the stadium and they would wait at the stadium, and whoever was coming, like whether you're coming to work out, whether you're coming to just watch film or whatever, they'd be like, all right, we're going to test you while we have you here. Oh, shit. So it was like a big trap. So that's when they'd usually get like 60 guys at once peeing, and just like you get out of there, right? So one time this guy was coming down and he friggin' like one dude was like, yo, the testers are here. And he literally like dipped, just ran. Yeah. He just ran away. So, and then another time they showed up to his house and he ran out the back door and jumped the fence and ran away, but never booked him because they never could test him. Right. So it's this weird thing that is, if they don't actually test you, you can kind of get away with this. It's so strange, but that's kind of, in a nutshell, how the testing works. But, so when we would take this time off and we would stop, we'd come back and it'd be wild. So that was like 3 and 4 months. This is back a few years. I didn't really take a break from regularly smoking weed for like 5 years, at least. So straight, like, you know, and, so the first couple nights were pretty tough. It's like, you know, October 1st and on was pretty tough. It was, I mean, tough as in, you know, I was kind of tossing and turning when I was sleeping. Nothing that bad. Wasn't tripping out. I was like having like kind of weird like night sweats a little bit, which I don't usually have. And then I was having kind of weird dreams. Usually my dreams were like wild coming back. Like, what is happening? Like dreams like super crazy. But I think because my body was, you know what I'm saying? My body was so used to, like, because they say THC interrupts your REM cycle. But I think my body was so used to it because I would dream. It's not like I didn't dream even when I was regularly smoking weed. So anyway, when I came back, it, you know, probably took like 3-4 days, and then I could just, you know, fall asleep normally. And, you know, as the days went on, I just kind of was like, you know, it wasn't bad, like, but it was just like kind of like, wouldn't want to say boring, but, you know, it took a lot. It was a nice exercise and kind of like willpower, essentially. I said I wanted to do it, and I did it. I didn't really notice, like, again, just because I had smoked so regularly, I think I just had everything figured out. I was like, you know, feeling like my tolerance was, you know, good, but while I was still smoking, that I was just kind of like used to it so much that, you know, taking a break from it, it wasn't like, oh, I'm so clear now and, oh, I'm thinking better. I found like maybe I was like slightly wittier, and then if anything, I was like, I maybe had like a little bit more of like a shorter fuse. Not like I was like snapping all the time, but if anything, I was like listening to Rage Against the Machine a lot and just like a little bit more like kind of edgy, which I'm never like normally. And but again, like I said, it was a good practice. And, you know, I always kind of say, like, you know, weed like kind of puts a little shine on everything. It just makes things a little bit nicer. You know, it raises vibrations of things basically completely, you know what I mean? And so what I found essentially is that over the time, or over the month, I should say, everything just was like a little bit like vibrationally lower. So it wasn't like dim, wasn't like boring, wasn't like awful, but, you know, it was just like, I'm so used to just having things, you know, enhanced a little bit. And, you know, it was just kind of like, just figuring that out was kind of really interesting, and just kind of, I guess it was kind of getting back to baseline essentially. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Again, great, felt good. You know, it was nice. I was running. I was working with my buddy Darren. We were training a little bit. He was doing more like dynamic stuff with me, which was pretty fun, which is like stuff that I never really did. You know, I was always doing, you know, strength training and all that stuff. So again, it was just kind of a nice month. I was reading a little bit more, just to kind of explore, you know, and, you know, just to see if I was kind of like, you know, even if I was like truthfully, honestly dependent on smoking weed all the time. And I didn't feel like I needed to go back. At some points I kind of felt like, because again, back in the football days, I had that like looming football, you'll be suspended, you'll screw the team over. That was the other thing too, is the team would always be like, yo, if you get caught, this looks terrible on the whole school. My first year at Western was a year after Waterloo just got booked for steroids too. 9 or 10 guys on their team got booked for steroids. So they were testing for real. Like, it wasn't even a joke that they were obviously going to test everybody in the OUA. And
Damn. Damn.
Yeah, so I had that looming over my head, but this month it was just me deciding to do this, right? So, you know, it was cool. It was I'm always kind of the first guy to be like, you shouldn't deprave yourself of stuff. You know, I'm into like, you know, if you're going to be indulgent or whatever, I totally understand. Sometimes you have to go to like, it's a bit like Jim Morrison kind of thing. You have to go to the excess to really understand something. And I'm not condoning like doing that on the regular, but every once in a while, sometimes you got to just like take in the maximum of whatever it is. If it's like some type of drug, if it's some type of experience.
Hedonism.
Yeah, essentially, yes. In general, 100% I'm a hedonist. But so at points I'd kind of be like, why am I torturing myself? There's no reason why I'm doing this other than the fact that I said I wanted to do this. But again, I made it through. I didn't crack. Had a couple weird dreams that I did smoke weed. Like that I think I only had one dream that I smoked weed. I had dreams that I drank, which is odd because it wasn't like it was the drink that I was really taking a break from, but but they'd be dreams like I took a drink and be like, oh fuck, I blew it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That's kind of cool, man.
And I'd be like, oh shit, like the whole month, it was just like automatic. Like I was chilling with my buddies and they just handed me and I did it and I was like, oh, what the fuck? So weird dreams like that, right? But honestly, so that was like I'd say like week 2, I was like, man, why am I doing this to myself? Like, I kind of feel like, the other thing too is sometimes you come back from work, right? And you're like, oh, I want to relax. And like, you have a bit of a routine or whatever, and you just want to like chill out. Excuse me. But, those are the times where you'd be like, man, all I had to do is like smoke weed and then I could be chilling, like doing nothing, whatever, hanging out. But then, you just maybe watch a podcast or read a book a little bit, and then that kind of feeling goes away. And then, so by week 3, I'd say like the last few days, like week 4 kind of thing, I was just like, yeah, whatever. Like, this is kind of cool. Almost felt a little bit like, I wouldn't go as far as saying indifferent, but I was just kind of like, yeah, I could smoke weed or I could not. Like, right. Totally. Like, come November 1st, I was kind of, but then like, I was just kind of excited that I made it through the month and I stayed up till midnight on Halloween. And I was just like, had a beer, smoked a couple bowls, and I was fucking ripped. Nice. Jesus Christ. Nice. It was like my friggin' heart was pounding and stuff. Like it was wild. Like, not in a bad way, but I was just like stuff that I didn't notice before. That probably happens almost every time. I was just like, oh man, like I'm feeling it. And then like I went to bed and straight up had a psychedelic experience. Like straight up saw like fractal stuff, like little kind of like cubist kind of imagery. And like it was in silent darkness, right? Because I'm in bed with eyes closed and stuff. And it was just like this whole shit. It wasn't like super intense, but like I don't even know if I've ever really had that from smoking weed, like that I noticed. Because most of the times when I'd come back after the break, you'd be chilling with all the boys. Mm-hmm. Like we'd all be in like one of our houses, like in the basement, chilling and talking, laughing, whatever. Not like eyes closed, essentially, just like feeling it. Yeah. Right. So that was really interesting for sure.
You got to like assess it in a different kind of
nature and like blank slate. Like this is like a big like I think I did just one. I think I just did one bong toke. I think I just did one, but it was like, literally, like I said, it was psychedelic, and I really felt, it was coming back to it, like I said, in a really good way. It wasn't bad. It was it was a reset essentially again. And, I felt really good, about making it through, not really slipping at all. Had a couple dreams where I was slipping or whatever, but, that's just kind of the way it goes. Right. But, What do we got going on here, boys? Oh, we're just figuring it out. Jack and Christian are just figuring life out back here. But again, it was a really good month, and I felt that whole exercise, maybe it's something I can do maybe every year. I don't know, like maybe it's something I can do like a week every quarter kind of thing, like just like it kind of works out to a month kind of thing. But really, like I said, just that experience of really having that blank slate, coming back to it, and like I said, like honestly, that experience was like pretty trippy. Where weed is like it's like a low grade psychedelic, right? Like it's kind of like we've all kind of been there, especially when you eat it.
Especially the first time as well.
Sure.
Like keep in mind, like remember the first time you smoked weed.
Yeah.
And what it felt like.
Yeah.
And now, so it's I think that's something that people kind of forget or just push to the side or whatever. But it is like psychoactive, and it does do a lot to you. Like one thing that I started paying attention to was just like you hear about that 20 to 25 age.
Yeah.
And they're like, yo, don't overdo it, man.
Sure.
Give your brain like the time to get intact. Figure stuff out before you're like completely fried out.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Moderation.
Yeah, moderation's key, including moderation. But I think, man, so many kids like start smoking like super early. Like I think that's really interesting. Like when
did you start smoking weed?
I started smoking weed between grade 11 and 12. Yeah. How about you, Jack?
I tried to smoke weed like beginning of high school, didn't work.
Okay.
Like, I don't know if I just didn't do it
like
right.
grade 9?
It was just bunk. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
And then properly got high grade 10. Didn't really smoke in high school, like 1 or 2 here and there.
Yeah.
With the boys.
Yeah.
Grade 12 was probably like a more consistent year.
Nice.
And then second year uni, like that's when it like became like a consistent thing. And I like started buying it.
Sure.
Started like going places with it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like it became like more of a social thing that I like had attached.
Sure.
If
Okay.
you will. Yeah.
How about you, Christian? When did you start?
My first time was the summer of grade 10.
Nice.
Shout out my parents if you ever listen to this. Man. But yeah, man, mine was kind of the same. I only did it one time.
Yeah.
In that kind of time period, I did a bit of like after prom and shit.
True.
But then when it came to like first year, that's when I really dabbled into another experience of things.
Yeah.
And it was also the same time I felt like I was getting into more in-depth like aspect of
Sure.
everything, so that's when I started to even deal with like psychedelic
Sure.
thought, like the whole aspect of getting intro into it, like just researching it and whatnot.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's one thing I was always like really interested in was like how other people were when they started smoking and what they did.
Right.
Because people would be like, yo, I smoked and I slumped out, slept, ate. I'm like, bro, I watched 6 documentaries. I was up all night. You know how much shit I watched?
I sculpted the statue of David.
There's so much that like doesn't get, kept.
Sure.
And doesn't get,
It's like people doing shrooms at like
the
clubs.
To ideas as well.
Sure,
You're just
100%.
like,
Well, it's misusing
fuck,
it.
bro, guess what
Essentially,
I saw last night?
you're
I don't even
misusing it.
remember.
Yeah.
But at the time, like your brain just works in a way.
Right.
Plus, you got a little substance.
Sure. Well, that's the thing. It shows you how much intention, comes into any trip, right? Like, you could just be smoking weed because that's what happens. You like to kind of change things, or you like to smoke weed because you like to expand your mind and you like to, visit new possibilities, and you don't really want to necessarily go like super deep. You don't necessarily want to eat 5 grams of shrooms, or you don't want to like eat acid or anything, but you can smoke some weed and get pretty close, and it's only going to be, maybe 4 hours tops,
Pretty
right?
close.
Not okay. Pretty close is really relative, but honestly, from that experience I had the other day, what's that?
If you're not a like consistent weed smoker, it's comparable for sure.
That's what I mean, and that's what I mean. Like, if you're a regular
Having
smoker,
never done anything
if
else,
you're
whatever.
if you're a regular smoker, you have a completely kind of different view of that. But like if you take long breaks in between and you smoke it, it kind of is like, again, psychedelic light. Other than that, it doesn't really, like, if you kind of have a decent tolerance and you do your thing, it's not really gonna have like super psychedelic powers on you kind of thing. But again, you know, like I said, it's like doing shrooms at a party, man. It's like, or sorry, doing shrooms at like a club, and like you're just doing it because like it makes the lights like go weird a little bit stuff. It's just, again, it's misuse. That's not responsible using, you know what I mean? And I think that, you know, when I started, so again, between grade 11 and 12, you know, I only really smoked on weekends, maybe every second weekend, really. It was with my one buddy. You know, we'd get a little bit. We'd literally like almost make a bong every time and like destroy it. We were so weird with it. We finally got like a small one, and it was like, a small little bubbler to smoke weed. It was glass, and we were like, oh man, this thing is so cool. We thought we were the shit, but we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And we would just smoke weed and freaking munch. My mom always had so much food, and we would just munch so much. And then I'd fall asleep or something, and then my buddy would leave. It was jokes. But again, like not crazy. I was playing basketball like a mofo back in high school. I was starting my football career. I was just like not really smoking like regularly. Then in first year, again, you know, no smoking during the season, which is like the beginning of school. And then afterwards, I didn't know you were allowed to smoke in the off season. So I still wasn't. So I was like kind of chilling. And then one of the senior guys on the team was like, yo, man, what are you doing? You're allowed to smoke in the off season, like go to town. And that's when I found out mad guys on the team were blazing it up. And it was great, man. Like we got in it, just everyone having a good time, smoking it up, you know, university style, getting after it. And then in those time periods where I had to take the time off for smoking weed, that's when I started discovering psychedelics, because they never tested for psilocybin. And like they'd have to basically catch you while you were high to like for it to come out in your urine kind of thing. So, you know, that was, I don't even think it was on the banned substance list. So it's really interesting how the Ethics Center, Canadian Center for Ethics in Sports wants you to not do drugs, but if anything, they're forcing you to do more drugs, because you're kind of like, well, I would just be smoking weed right now, but actually I want to, you know, change or alter my consciousness a little bit, and I'm going to look for something that's not on the banned substance list, aka mushrooms. And I thank them. I thank the CCES every day, because they got us in. And the first time I ever did mushrooms, I went to see April Wine with my buddy. We went to see April Wine in Chatham, Ontario at the Chatham Rib Fest, and it was unreal. It was a great time. Didn't do too much. I'll probably get into it a little bit more some other day. But again, it was interesting that the whole testing thing almost drove me to try them even more, because I was just like, well, they're not going to test me for this, and again, I'm kind of looking for this like altered mind state, and again, you know, every once in a while, and that was a little bit different. Not everyone was into the shrooms as much, but there was a few guys on the team that were down. Honestly, one of the best days, I'll say this, one of the best days of my whole life, actually. Me and like a handful of dudes from the team, a couple of my roommates, we did a bunch of shrooms, and literally played every sport. We had like lacrosse sticks out. We were shooting hoops. My buddy was taking clappers at the garage door. That's hockey terminology for slap shots. If anyone out there listening doesn't know what that means, shout out Canada, baby. Just checking them boys here. How we doing? We're good. Nice. Just technical difficulty, but again, you know, that kind of those events where you're challenging your mind. There's no doubt about it that a lot of these trips are going to be challenging. You know, not necessarily bad trips, but it's something that, you know, it's heavy duty on your mental capacity, and I think that is, if anything, that's mental. That's training, right? And you know, everyone talks about getting your body right. Trainers, team doctors, physiotherapists, everyone's out there. and then all of a sudden we're asking, not even, we're demanding of these athletes that they got to figure things out on their own. That the mental aspect, probably the hardest part of many games is the mental aspect. I've seen many athletes come and go in multiple sports that were phenomenal athletes, but they were freaking head cases, and they just never made it because they weren't coachable or just whatever. And again, it's sad that we leave these athletes kind of out in the cold to fend for themselves. And again, so potentially some of the psychedelic use could lead to this mental training that will only lead to better athletes, only lead to better sport, only lead to more enjoyment in all that stuff, and in life, not just in sport too, right? Like, this can benefit anybody. And I mean, make sure you don't have any history of serious like schizophrenia in your family or anything like that. Not when you're young. Make sure you're responsible use, like I will always say. But I think that was a pretty good recap of the month, and now we're into Remember November. So cheers, everybody. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time. See ya.